Belcha and welcome. My name is Dawn Beaton. Thank you for joining us here at the Centre for Cape Breton Studies at Cape Breton University. Today's guest started dancing in concerts around the time he started school and added fiddle and piano a short time later. While in high school, he found himself working with Paul Simon and performing in a Philip Glass off-Broadway production. Since the early 90s, he has made albums which run the gamut from traditional Cape Breton fiddle music to boundary-busting rock and roll style fiddle arrangements to fronting a full-on rock band. One of the most celebrated Canadian roots musicians of all time, having sold in excess of 500,000 albums, he has garnered international acclaim by playing the fiddle in that hard-nosed, traditional Cape Breton style, while adding his own spin, mixing genres, and updating Celtic music to appeal to a broader spectrum of fans. So stay tuned for some great tunes, conversation, and more as we celebrate Cape Breton Island's living Celtic culture with the one and only Ashley MacIsaac. And welcome. My name is Dawn Beaton, and we're here today with a very special guest that's come a great distance to be here, and we're really excited to talk to the Ashley MacIsaac. Hi, Ashley.
I'm hoping that all the pre-interview stuff, the blooper reel, You're not going to release that, are you?
No, that's
because there's some good stuff on there, right? Nice to see you, Dawn.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to see you, and it's great to have you home. Means a lot to have you back.
Great to be home.
Yeah.
Summertime. I don't often get down in summer anymore because I like to take my summers off. Mm-hmm. So I may get down once, but I've been down twice now, and you can't beat being around here in the summertime for sure.
Well, I know you're a big seafood fan, so it's a good time to hit home, right?
Yeah. Since I've been home, I've had scallops, I've had lobsters, I've had mussels, I've had fish. I like seafood, and I never grew up with that because, like a lot of Cape Bretoners, I suppose that your family either loved it or didn't. Mm-hmm. And my mother's father, there's two things. When she was young, they used to hunt deer and eat a lot of deer, and he was also a fisherman and eat a lot of fish. So when she grew up, she didn't like deer, and she didn't want to have fish cooked in the house.
Yeah.
But when I went away, I realized what a beautiful thing we have here in our seafood. So when I come back, I just fill up on it.
Yeah. So is it Windsor that you call home these days? Yeah. But I'm sure your parents really appreciate you driving home and getting across the causeway.
Yeah, they actually met me. I went to Prince Edward Island first because my cousin Wendy MacIsaac, who's going to be part of Celtic Colors this year with me, she was playing a couple of shows over in a place called Abrams Village where they have an Acadian festival. Mm-hmm. And I'd first been there maybe 25 years ago, and my mother is part French, so I'm part French, and I wanted to go hang out there. So I went to see Wendy, got on the ferry, and Dad met me in Pictou, Nova Scotia, and we headed for the causeway.
Nice. Well, speaking of your father, I was wondering how you first got into fiddle playing. How old were you, and when did it all begin for yourself?
Well, I started probably because there was music around the house. Dad plays, and he didn't play for a few years. He had a frozen shoulder from an operation, but since I've been home, I've heard him play a bit. His father could play the fiddle. His father sang Gaelic, and the first real lesson in Gaelic culture I had was from my grandfather, Willie A., when I was 4. Mm-hmm. He died in 1980, but in 1979 he used to come to the house and he taught me a few Gaelic songs.
Really?
And of course I heard the fiddle from Dad, and my mother's people a lot of them are step dancers and love music. So by 5, I started taking step dancing lessons, and I started out with Minnie McMaster, of course Natalie's mom, and then moved on to my cousin Wendy's mother, Geraldine MacIsaac, and eventually married Janet MacDonald.
Okay.
And after step dancing for a few years, opportunity arose where I could get my own fiddle, and I wanted fiddle lessons.
Really?
So I was 8.5 when I got my fiddle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
my dad won the lottery. Was the opportunity.
Really?
He won the lottery, and we each could get a present. And my sister wanted balloons, and she was like, I guess, only 6. And my brother, I think Henry, wanted some he wanted a Def Leppard collection or something, and I wanted a fiddle. I was in piano lessons, but I wanted to learn the fiddle, and so that's what I got. And still to this day, although I don't have it here with me today, it's my favorite fiddle, which I play whenever I can.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you keep that home in Cape Breton, or do you have it with you?
No, it's at my home in Ontario, and it's gone through so many breaks and splits, and like literally me banging it off a wall at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and different things for performances that it got to a point where it couldn't be repaired properly, so I repaired it. And the last 2 shows I did, a symphony was in Victoria. I played with it. I mean, it looks crazy, like it's all open, but it worked, and it feels like I know, like the first time I played. And then the next week I was going to New York. I was playing. They asked me to come down to play Happy Birthday for Philip Glass's birthday for a private birthday for him. So played it, and on the way back, they left the fiddle outside in my road case in like -20 in Ohio at the airport for 3 hours. Neck split. I haven't repaired it since that.
God.
So it's home, and when I'm at the lowest of the low musically, which doesn't happen very often, but certain times you get fed up or you get stagnant, I'll put the fiddle back together and I'll pick that one up, and it'll be just like my first lesson in Antigonish with Stan Chapman.
Wow. It's great that you had that to go back to recapture that spirit.
Yeah, the first thing I play whenever I put it back together, I play the first tune that I took the first lesson that night, learned to play. And it skips back before, girlfriends, boyfriends, bills, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, as they call it. And all of a sudden, I'm 8.5 years old with that fiddle again. So I remember exactly sitting there playing the first night, and it's one of those little memory things that if you weren't a musician, you wouldn't really have that same thing. So I'm fortunate to still have that instrument.
And so what was that tune?
Mora Gifted Vega.
Was it?
Yeah.
That was the first tune he taught me, too.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think he taught everybody that tune.
Yeah. It's a good one to start off.
Well, it is. It's not that complicated, but if you play it properly, it's just as good as any other tune.
So now, you're 8.5. Did you start off playing left-handed right away? Or because could you play right as well, or you always kept it to the left?
My sister Lisa actually took, I think, a while learning to play left-handed, because she's left-handed like myself.
Okay.
But then she switched over and she plays right-handed now predominantly.
Okay.
And so she could do both, but no, not me. I'm the same way I play hockey. I pick up the fiddle.
Yeah. And did you ever find it challenging, or it's what you knew and it's never been?
I remember the first night Stan talking with my dad about Stan walked up and said, oh, what's this? I was holding it the other way. And he was showing us how to hold it first, the first 20 minutes of classes. And Dad instantly piped up and said, yeah, that's the way he picked it up. And Stan said, well, that's all right if he wants to. And Dad asked him, should you change the strings around? And Stan said, well, if you change the strings on your fiddle, you'll never be able to play anyone else's fiddle. So if he's going to learn that way, learn that way. And as I got older, I realized I have some real advantages to other violinists. I have disadvantages because of it. One is, if you pick up an instrument and you look at it, when you're playing the low notes, the way I'm playing it, it's on the low side.
Yes.
And I go up to the high. Whereas if you were playing it this way, the low notes are up above. So it just makes sonic sense to me that I have a better low end because my power is on the lower side of it. And of course your fingers one goes this way and one goes that way, so it didn't really matter that way.
Yeah.
But it's harder to play positions.
Yes.
If I'm going to, typically if you're playing positions, you just slide up the violin.
Yeah.
But I have to come over to play it, so it's harder to keep it accurate.
No kidding. You're tough.
You get used to whatever it is.
Great for King George IV, though. When you're first learning a tune, it's like you've got the real advantage, like you said.
Yeah, the bottom end of the fiddle is where I think most Cape Bretoners really love to hear the music played. They like tunes in D, and they definitely love the low strings for King George IV and those type of tunes. Yes. And even something like Hector the Hero. If you really want to be passionate, it's in that as soon as you start playing it. And that's on the bottom side of it, the way I'm playing it.
think it's also the dirtiest part of the fiddle. Like, you can really put the dirt in that way with...
I broke it last night playing this one, and I was doing exactly that. I was playing hard on the bottom of it, and all of a sudden there was so much pressure that I'd had a different bridge on it. It's a little too high maybe for it. And with that much pressure on the low end that I was just a giving her, a place called the Doryman, Shetty Camp, it pulled the whole tailpiece right off it, and the whole thing came apart. It actually broke the tailpiece on the end. So I got to watch sometimes because I'll put too much meat and potatoes in it.
And I was going to lead to my next question. Do you have a favorite venue or a favorite place to play? Which could be one and the same.
The favorite place I've ever played is Carnegie Hall, obviously.
Yeah?
Yeah, just you sort of know when you're walking out, okay, if you can do it right here, you know, if I can do it here, I can do it anywhere. But it's more than the New York vibe. You're in Carnegie Hall with all the history, and you think to yourself when you're walking on stage, don't screw up.
Yeah.
And so there's still nerves to go out there, and I've played it 7 times now in different people's concerts. But every time there's still the same, okay, well, it doesn't get much better than playing here, so give it your best.
Yeah.
So when I know I have to give it my all, which as I've gotten older, I've played thousands of shows, you don't give 110% all the time.
Yeah.
You try and give 95% and up. But certain times, like I've played the Olympics, or if I have played the Acropolis, different venues like that, when you go to Carnegie Hall, if you're not trying your best, why are you there? Yeah. So it's exciting as a musician after so many shows to still feel that nerve. There you go. It's almost like the Celtic Colours opening show. Yeah.
Really?
Because that's in front of locals. Playing Celtic Colours local shows like when you're a teenager playing in high school. Right? You got to really do well to impress the people that know you best. And every time I've played the opening of Celtic Colours, I go, okay, I'm going to figure out how to leave here and have been at least as good as not the best as everyone else that's playing tonight. And this year to have Wendy, when we were talking about what we're going to do, we still haven't totally figured out what the numbers are. I said, Wendy, I just want to do one thing. We better go out and be the stars that night. We're the 2 of us there, 2 MacIsaacs. We better just give her.
From just down the road.
Right? We don't let the people who paid a good ticket not be impressed.
Yeah.
So that's what excites me. Any venue that still gives me a desire to want to play the best. And Shetty Camp, where I played last night, I try pretty hard there too.
You give your heart and soul up there, that's for sure.
For sure,
yeah. Favorite key to play in? Any favorites there?
I think I like the sound of a lot of the tunes that I play in A. But a lot of music is written. It doesn't matter. Like if I play well in F, it's very pretty. It's harder to play in F though. So sometimes I don't play it as well. So I wouldn't say it's my favorite key to play in. Overall, if I was to equate between what I think sounds nice and what I know I'm pretty good at in that key and still has some mysticalness about it, because A can have that, it's definitely E.
Oh, okay.
Play in E.
Okay.
There's times in E that for slow tunes particularly that I go, okay, you can pull the passion out in this range. So A or E.
Cool. And one last question, favorite tune, if you can narrow it down. Or is that even possible?
That I suppose changes over the years, but the tune that, I talk about playing in Shetty Camp. Last night I played a couple of groups, and then I just leaned over to Robbie and I said, "You ready?" And then I just Buddy McMaster's famous intro to when he starts King George IV, everybody was happy. It's exciting. Everybody knows the tune. They like it. I didn't know if I'd ever have one of them, and I think probably Miss Lyles is that for me.
Yeah.
So when I'm playing traditionally, when I start the introduction to Miss Lyles, well, I can get 3 notes in and have the whole crowd screaming.
Yeah.
And that's pretty exciting to get that response.
Oh, yeah.
Favorite tune overall to perform, because I performed it so much and mostly with a band, and I still play it traditionally. It's not the same reaction, but Devil in the Kitchen is the one that shreds the bow and gets an audience going.
Yeah. I was teaching Devil in the Kitchen this week at the Gaelic College, and I was mentioning you and how you play it, so...
Well, there's a long story, but it's a short story. How I actually got to the point in the 2 minutes before what had taken place when we recorded the version that eventually became the single and a video for Hi, How Are You Today. And it's one to be left indiscriminately off this tape. But that's a one-off moment on a recording that all things gelled at that point that it happened, including the musicians and timing is everything. And I could play that, whether or not I'll be able to pull it off. But if I'm 75 and still alive and can play fiddle and put that with a rock band, I know that I'll have the drive that I had when I was 19.
Yeah.
It gets harder as I get older. Yeah. But that's a corker of a tune.
It is, yeah. Well, I'd love to hear some tunes, so maybe we'll have a few to go right now.
All right.
Thanks. To check out the full festival lineup, visit Celtic-Colors.com. We'd like to take this time to thank our sponsors who have been so gracious to assist us in the production of this podcast. Imagine studying music on a beautiful island known for its deep roots in music and culture. Cape Breton University offers a music program like no other in Canada. With an emphasis on traditional and popular music, CBU's music major provides an exciting alternative to conservatory-style classical or jazz music programs. Their course offerings are unique. The music theory courses are aimed at the needs of contemporary musicians and help you understand the music you play. In the applied music courses, you get to study with teachers who have worked with names like the Bear McNeils, Ashley MacIsaac, and Natalie McMaster. Through work placements, you will gain experience in the music field tailored to your interests, whether it's studio experience, promotion, tourism, or artist management. Through the optional business minor, you can add smart, real-world management skills to the creative talent you develop. The ethnomusicology focus lets you explore local traditions, popular song, as well as music and dance from cultures all over the world. Their issues-based courses will immerse you in the debates that shape music today.
Explore Cape Breton Island's top 10 experiences. Plan your visit at cbisland.com. Your heart will never leave.
I gotta let my fingers calm down now.
That was
You know,
great.
it's awful. I'm a cigarette smoker, and usually after playing, if you do one number, I'm like instantly out to have a smoke. So if I talk too much now, that's why.
No problem. You spoke earlier about your Hi, How Are You album, which I think, in my life, for the number of years I've been on this planet, it's been probably one of the most influential and important albums. And beyond that, I think it's one of the most important albums for Cape Breton music and beyond. It was 95 that it came out, I think.
Came out in November of '94, I believe.
94.
It might have been 95, but I think I graduated in '93, and then I spent about 18 months. So I think it was around the very end of '94. I'm not sure. I remember a lot of water under the bridge since then.
Yeah.
I've actually made 13 records since that. Go figure.
So the one prior to that it was a traditional album, right?
Well, I did a Christmas one just before that.
Oh, yeah.
And then did Close to the Floor, the first record, when I was, I guess, 16. I tell a story a lot about being on a school bus with Natalie, was in grade 12, and one morning she showed me her bank book because she had put out 4 on the Floor.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, how do I do that, Natalie? And she said, well, you go to this studio, and this guy will help you out. You make a record, and I'll tell you where you get them manufactured. And so that was, I guess I was in grade 10, and that fall, I started thinking about it, and that winter I went to Joey Beaton's. He had at the time Joey Beaton's Retail Enterprises and Raleigh Products in Mab. It was his store, which is now Androyak. I think Androyak is in there, or whatever it is.
I think it's the Red Shoe.
Maybe it's the Red Shoe.
It was
right.
Cooperator's Insurance, and then he got it. And
Right.
Then, yeah.
So I went there, rehearsed with him in February, made that first record, Close to the Floor, 16, put it out, did pretty well with it, made enough that the bank would give me another loan to make my Christmas one. Made the Christmas one, and then ended up in New York for 6 months in the beginning of grade 12. Came back from there and thought, how am I going to get back to New York? Because I was back in Cape Breton, and I just experienced New York for 6 months in grade 12, going, I got to get back here. And I started thinking about what sort of record might take me off the island a little farther. I ended up joining a band then at the end of that year. I joined Ron Hines' band. I played mandolin and keyboards for Ron on a tour called, he had a record out called Crier's Paradise. Did that, and while we were touring that, I was doing one song each night with the band, which made it to Hi, How Are You Today, from a group called Stockton's Wing. And I recorded it and called it Wingstock in honor of them. And every night we were touring that, Ron's show was going great, but it was killing that show. People, that number in the show, people were loving it. So Ron's management at the time said, hey, maybe you should make a record like this. So I'd been thinking of making a dance record straight on. But I ended up then putting together rock musicians, and that's how eventually it turned into, I toured while I was recording that record.
Wow.
And then the record came out, as I say, it was maybe early 95, end of 94. And, everybody says they have, in a person's career, there's their best record. To this date, sales-wise, and what has had, I guess, longevity-wise, would be that record. There's individual tracks from other records that I've been very happy with and like just as much, be they traditional or crossover. But Hi, How Are You Today will be there until I make one better.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's the next one. You always hope that.
Absolutely, and that's why any one of us keeps going in that regard. Well, I think too, I was curious about the inspiration, so you totally you nailed that. I was curious, given that the way that album went.
Well, I'll tell you one. I'll interrupt you, but the real inspiration to make that record.
Yeah.
We were raised in Cape Breton at that point. There was nobody else had ever made a living off the fiddle. You know, people had it as a second job.
Yeah.
And in grade 12, I was realizing I'm making quite a bit of money. I was making almost as much as my dad was working in a 30-year seniority job.
Yeah.
And thought, okay, well, maybe I can make this attempt. So the inspiration musically was back 3 or 4 years before that. I'd seen a musician from Peru, I believe, who had made the K-Tel Presents records. Oh. And that was on television all the time, a magical pan flutist named Zamfir. And I'd remembered, okay, if they can sell pan flute all over the world, I can sell fiddle. So my inspiration was to somehow at some point see the little yellow bouncing ball go beside the notes of the fiddle tune on a commercial for K-Tel Presents. Ashley MacIsaac was going to be, instead of words, be I thought, I want to have that happen. So I was really inspired to go big from knowing that instrumental music could do it and that nobody else had done it. It was the same time the Rankins were having a huge success with their first record. Yeah. And, you know, that was song-driven. And, of course, Sleepy Maggie off of Hi How You Day was a song that really escalated the record up there. But when I started making the record companies basically were like, I mean, I had every one of them wanting to sign me, but they all in the back rooms are saying, how are we going to sell this? Yeah. And so it was a shock to them, but I wasn't entirely shocked. I knew that I was going for it, or I was going to go be a doctor or whatever. I was very smart in school. So I said, I'll take a year. And we started in that year making the record and touring, as I say, and just progressed.
Wow. Well, because it went that path, I'm curious, did you ever feel the pressure to be so trad and stay in that trad field, or did you never felt that?
No. I loved listening to Buddy play 14, 15, 16, 17 years old when I was those ages, because I think that's when Buddy was actually in his prime, from about 87 to about 93, or even before that. I heard it and I loved it, but I really learned him in those years. And also Howie had put out his first record. So Howie McDonald's record, I remember studying for my grade 7 exams, listening to the record 85 times in a row, you know. And so I knew that there was this traditional music I loved, but then I also knew I wanted to venture out farther. Truth be told, I went to Craignish Mountain. I looked off the mountain and decided one day, knowing how much money I was making off the traditional stuff, and I looked out at the water, and all the idea about playing traditional music just came to a conclusion was, okay, this is here. This is Cape Breton. This is traditional music, and that's out there. And if it doesn't work when you go out there, this is still going to be here. And I drove down the mountain and drove straight to Halifax, and I had management within about a week.
Really?
It was looking at the water thinking, okay, that's far away, and it's scary, but what's so wrong can happen? I could be back here playing for square dances. Yeah. Which subsequently was my desire when the record came out. Interviews, she just asked me, so what do you want to do? I go, I want to make $1 million and I want to go back to Cape Breton and build a house and play for square dances, which I did.
You did?
Well, the house burnt, so that's another story. But I succeeded in that, and because of the success, I continued to tour. Yeah. 20 years later.
It's amazing. Oh, that's great. And likewise, the follow-up album to Hi, How Are You was Fine, Thank You Very Much. Which was
the next record I'm thinking of calling How Are You Now? I don't know.
It's very Cape Breton of you. Yeah. But there's one track on that, and you introduce it as your father's favorite tune, and you've got Jan Allen.
Jan Allen plays on guitar, I play piano on that.
It's just the clarity of it. Like, you've done such great, with that track.
You want to hear a scary thing about that track?
What's that?
That track was good, but there's a better track than that I recorded with Jan Allen. The best version I've ever played of Christy Campbell medley.
Really?
So good. And it was supposed to be the last track on the record.
Yeah.
When they manufactured it, they cut it off. And I was angry. Long story short, I ended up not with that record company anymore, and I've never been able to get that tape back. But I had a great version of Christy Campbell with Jan Allen that just was a corker. But that was it. Jan Allen would give you so much life when you'd play with him.
I know.
Just full of energy. And again, someone like Maybelle, you know the history of these older players that you want to play good with them and they have their own thing. And Jan Allen in the studio was a barrel of laughs. It was just fun.
It was so perfect. And he just, when you go into the reel, he just does this, he just does a little off rhythm thing. Oh, it was just, and likewise, fiddlemusic.com. I mean, you've done a lot of live.
Another odd record that came up out of having spent 18 months in a lawsuit with a record company that wouldn't let me free. At the same time, they also wouldn't make another record. So it came down to some pretty extreme stuff. And then they decided, okay, you can go. Because I'm a Cape Bretoner. You know, I'm close to New Waterford right now, if you know what I mean, folks. And the day that they let me out, I called Dave MacIsaac the next day, and he was down 3 days later, and we went and made that record. Really? So records sort of come up in my career either based on necessity, because it's time, I got to make another record, or just out of the blue. But all of it is sort of out of the blue. Like I knew I wanted to make Hi, How Are You Today, but I didn't totally envision it before it happened.
Yeah.
And that's the way I think records should be. They should encapsulate a moment in time.
Yeah.
That's it. Those are the best ones. So if you listen to Captain Tennille today,
yeah,
it still sounds like then. It sounds good.
Yeah.
Because it was good then, it'll be good in the future. That's what I aim for, is catching, be it with Dave MacIsaac doing a record, being a live record I did with Maybelle at Savoy. Yes. It's all about and some records have taken me 3 years to work on. Okay. It's about saying, okay, that's what I sound like right then. I'll never sound like what I sound like when I was 18. I wouldn't want to. Sound like now what I sound like at 40.
Yeah. Yep. Well, you've had lots of mentors in your life, and I think, you've touched on Buddy, and you've touched on Janelle and Maybelle, and I'm sure there are more.
I love Maybelle.
She's sweet, eh?
Oh, I love her. I stopped at her house last night when I was in Shady Camp, and she had a pot of goulash on the stove. She said, come in afterwards, but it was too late when I was leaving. But Maybelle is one of those performers that no matter... she must have a microchip in her, because it doesn't matter. I've been playing with her since I was 16, which is over 25 years ago. And frankly, Maybelle wasn't a young woman then. So it doesn't matter how old Maybelle gets. She still just gives her.
She does.
I love playing with Maybelle.
Yeah, she's got quite the drive. There's a lot of Cape Bretoners that have that drive. It just, thank God we do, right?
There got to be a love for the music, is what it is. Yep. There was a fella when Denara MacDonald died. After the funeral, there was people standing around outside, and this little fella from Craignish, he's reported to have, he had a very dry sense of humor. And somebody said something about, Denara, he was an awful big man, and this dry fella turned around to the rest of them. He said, "Yeah, I guess he was full of music." That's it. We're bred with the music.
Yeah.
And it has to come out.
Has to come out. Yeah, through the pores somehow. So I'm excited for the show that you're going to be involved in for Maybelle, a tribute show down in Belcourt.
For sure. Well, I wanted to be involved with the theme of family on the opening show. That's one of the main reasons that I wanted to come down. But when you asked me about the Maybelle show, Maybelle I literally had a young musician once who dropped out on a gig a week before, and it was going to involve coming from Shady Camp, driving to Halifax, flying to interior BC, taking another small flight to the Yukon, then taking a helicopter in from the Yukon into northern BC, playing and doing it all in reverse in 48 hours.
Really?
And I'm going, who can I call to do this? Because I was so angry that this young person was like, oh, it's too much work. I called Maybelle. Yeah, no problem.
And she did it all the way from Cape Breton.
Right. I would do anything for Maybelle because she's done just about anything for me.
Aww. Well, she's pretty special, and I think it'll be another special night.
Yeah, I love her, and they talk about the masters and the greats, and obviously Buddy and Natalie for fiddle music, and Dwayne Cote, and people who have stood out over the years. We're fiddle players. but there's a few piano players that really stand out. Dougie McPhee, obviously, for his style.
Yes.
Joey Beaton for his rhythm. John Morris for his overall everything.
Yep.
But the queen of piano was Maybelle too, I mean, without a doubt.
Yeah, and I think that title will always remain with her.
Should.
Well, it's been a real and true pleasure to speak to you and get to know you a little better. I've definitely learned some good things.
Well, Dawn, the first time you got to know me, you were only knee-high to a grasshopper.
You
right?
played for us in probably Port Hood School.
Port Hood School. I remember the first time watching you and your sister dance and thinking, okay, there's the cutest people I've ever seen in my life. And never forgot that time playing. I think Kathy Holly was playing the piano that night. But yeah, you haven't changed a lick. You still have the great smile.
Aww.
I might have got old and nasty, but you haven't changed.
Well, it's been a real pleasure, and as always, so great to see you. And
congratulations on taking over Celtic Colours.
Oh God, I'm still. Well, it's a team effort. I can't.
Yeah, but somebody got to say yes and no in the end, right? And I know it's you.
Oh God, some days. Anyways, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
And thanks very much for tuning in. We'll leave you with a special clip from one of our Culture Bear interviews.
Well, I think from time to time we throw something in that's maybe sounds a little... I like to change it around a little bit, every so often, because if you listen to a lot of the people I backed, and I backed everybody at one point or another, as far as playing piano, chording and all that. And they tell me I was the first one to do the flip.
Really?
I was. And before, what's his name, the singer?
From away? Jerry,
No, from the States.
what's his name? Jerry Lee
Jerry
Lewis,
Lee,
yeah.
Dennis Ryan, I was playing with Dennis and Ashley up in Antigonish. Dennis was singing. It was a New Year's thing. And he put that public over the... He said she was the first to do it. He was second.
So what do you call that? What do you call it?
I just called it the flip, for lack of a better bit of terminology, a flip.
And is it
There is a name for it, but I'm not about to start thinking about that.
Does the flip always go, how do you do it, from top down, or does it...
I used to go to the bottom, from top to bottom, and then I used to...
So would you always go with your right hand?
But do you know what? Here, no, both. First it'd be the right. Then after a while, flip up. Then at the end of it, flip down, whatever. And I seem to end when I'm backing somebody up, I slip that in and when I first started that, the fiddlers didn't like it.
And why do you think that was?
Well, I think that they weren't used to it, dear. And it was something new to them, and it threw them off. But I kept doing it. I wouldn't stop for anybody. I mean, that was my style, and that was one of the things. But then sometimes I found myself doing it a bit too much, and I backed off a little bit. So now I don't do it as much, but I do it.
I think that it spurs the fiddlers on now.
It does spur the fiddlers on, and that's something I found out a little later. That certain fiddlers just love that. With the fiddle there. And then even Angus, who was my biggest critic when it came to that, my uncle, he said, do a few flips in this one, That's what he called it, too. But, no, they get very used to it and they begin to like it. And particularly at a dance, if you do this every once in a while, you'll see the dancers going, Yeah. So, no, that's a thing I brought into it.